Peace, Trae. How you doing?
I'm well. I'm well. Always great to get another real lifer tip under my belt. And I know we've covered a lot. Let's just go over what we covered last week, and that'll get us into where we are today.
Okay, so last week what we covered was a real lifer is conscious of their physical and mental diet. So we talked about how important it is to eat the right foods. We talked about how important it is to be able to ingest the right mental food as well. The things that you watch, the people that you're hanging around, the time that you spend on social media, those things like that.
Yeah. And trust me, I think this is a lesson that so many of us need to learn now, because the proliferation of technology has made it so easy for us to delve into things like TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and just, a lot of folks are like, that's where I get my news is through social media. Now there's not even reading the newspaper. This is where news is getting spread. So there's a lot of folks that are like, man, I got to be on there because I got to be on the know. But it's like it's inundating too. There's so much of it. So I really appreciated that tip from the last time you were here. Bring us into what we have to cover today.
So real lifer number 10 is a real lifer gets the proper amount of rest and does some sort of physical activity daily. So this kind of complements the one from last week, right? We're ingesting the proper physical and mental food, and that food helps us to be able to perform and function at a high level, but so does getting rest, and so does make sure we're staying active and being physically active. Now, when I was designing my curriculum, they thought I should separate these two, but they actually are, to me, are the same function, right? Because they're designed to make the body perform at a higher level. You need to get the proper amount of rest. You need to rest at the right time. So between the times of, they said bedtime, good bedtime is 10 o'clock, and you should get 7 to 9 hours of sleep. So about 8 hours of sleep average. So that should take you to 6 o'clock. So those are the perfect times of day to sleep. And that's kind of one of the bullets that we're going to cover here in a minute.
Wow. Okay. Between the last tip number 9 and this tip number 10, see, I got some real work to do. I'm telling you, because I think high performers or achievers, those who, do a lot, we get used to less hours of sleep, right? I'm like, about 5, 6 hours. And you get used to that. I know how it does my body no good over time. But in the short term, I feel like I'm spry. You know what I mean? Like I got it. But oftentimes I be needing like, okay, it's going to be a crash point at some point because I'm not doing a consistent, good amount of rest. So give us some of the points under this, see?
Well, before we get to the points, that's what Western society wants us to believe, right? They always want you working hard. If you're not, putting in those extra hours and going above and beyond, then you're lazy or considered lazy, right? But we do need our rest. I had this thing of peak performance, and I wanted to train people how to just be able to peak perform at all times, but it's not possible. Your body needs a break, just like a high performing Formula One vehicle or NASCAR vehicle. They have to come in for a pit stop, and they have to take a rest. They have to get the fuels back in. They have to change some parts out. So does our body, and that's what it does when we're at rest. So the first bullet point is make sure you sleep 6 to 8 hours a day at the right time, and we kind of already covered that. 10 o'clock is a good bedtime. And then about 6 o'clock, waking up, between that 7 and 9 hours. So that's the time where our body rejuvenates. Our mind has a chance to relax. We get a chance to reset. Now, it's okay. Like you said, sometimes if you're working hard, you got a project or something that requires you to, lose a few hours of sleep. It's good temporary, but over a long period of time, it will be a problem.
Yeah. I mean, I think that too many of us really succumb to what you were talking about there in terms of Western society and feeling lazy just for taking time for ourselves, right? It's like this guilty conscience constantly, internal battle that oftentimes you're dealing with is like this internal conversation you're having with yourself about the time that you need to actually replenish your energy. And it's so important, and it really does go well with point number 9, because it really follows what we're ingesting, right? And what we're putting into our bodies, what we're putting into our psyche and into our minds. All of that is a part of it. So I love how each one of these points always seems to flow into the other.
Yes.
What's point number 2 here?
Point number 2 is take time out of every day for self-care. So while you were just saying that, I was thinking about this is why we get burnout. This is why we feel overwhelmed. This is why we become anxious or depressed or have these situations where we don't feel good. It's because we don't give our body time to recover. And self-care is a critical part of that. But like you say, so many people feel guilty about, taking self-care or taking time off because, like how people are going to view them or what society says we should be. But it's very, very important that we make time for self-care.
For me, a lot of self-care stuff is nothingness.
Mhm.
But I don't have enough of nothingness. Someone said to me, I don't mind more as long as it's less, like more of less things on my
Yeah,
schedule, my calendar, things to do.
yeah.
And it really stuck with me because I thought, well, at the time I thought it was hilarious, but also so very true. And I don't. My former assistant would literally put, days on my calendar of like, do not book anything.
Yes.
And it didn't really work because I'd be like,
Mm.
well, I guess that means
Ex-
it's a free day, so I'm gonna, right.
Yeah.
And even when I do additional things, like for my sons, for instance, right, on one of those weekends that was blocked off on my calendar, we went out and we camped. But it wasn't really self-care necessarily because it was a lot of energy, a lot of work, right? And as the mother, there was a lot of things I had to put into that, a lot of money and time.
Yeah.
And even though I enjoyed it, it wasn't really what you're talking about here in terms of like self-care. And I think sometimes there's a fine line between us understanding that, taking a vacation. Sometimes you're like, oh, I'm going to take a vacation. But then you get to the place and you don't rest, right?
The piece with self-care is really time for yourself.
Yeah.
Because when you go on a camping trip, you're focused on your kids. You want them to have a good time. You're trying to make sure everything goes smooth and goes. So you're actually working. It doesn't seem like work because it's recreation, but you're actually working. Same thing with a vacation, right? You always hear people say, well, I need a vacation for my vacation,
Yeah.
right? Because it's work. You're doing something. You're active. Really, self-care is time that you can just be whatever you want to be in the moment without having to worry about anybody else and focus 100% solely on you.
I just appreciate this distinction. I think more of us really need to embody this in our lives. First off, I'm telling you, because it's one of those things where
Yeah.
I'm like, I look at all of the different, groups I'm involved with. And even though the work is spread out for me on my calendar,
Yeah.
it ends up being right.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate this. What's point number 3?
So
C?
point number 3 is start simple and increase your physical activity as you're able. So the first one is rest. The first one is kind of in between rest and the physical activity. And then the third one is the physical activity. So a lot of times we have people, we want to start out and we want to do something, right? I know I need to change what I've been doing, my routine, my habit. I know I need to be more physically active, but we want to start out there, way out there. We ain't trying to take no baby steps, not crawl, walk, run. We trying to let's go run a marathon next week. And that ain't possible. Start off little because your mind, the brain is coming up with the thought consciously. Your mind is saying that ain't realistic.
Right.
We ain't even gonna put no energy into that. You go on with that somewhere. We're gonna hang out back here. So what you have to do is start slow. Maybe you start off just putting on your sweatsuit. And just sit at the house in your sweatsuit. Maybe the next day you open up the door, breathe the fresh air. Okay, go back to it. And then the next day you might actually walk off the porch or, take a walk down the block or something and starting those little steps. Because as you do something, it's the starting that's important. Because once you start, your brain is going to say, well, if we're doing this, we might as well, do a little more. I got down on the floor. I'm going to do 5 push-ups. And then after a few days, I can do 10. Well, I can throw an extra one in there, So you start to get in the habit. And once you get in the habit, it almost becomes something that you have to do now.
Well, it goes back to reprogramming our brains. I mean, we've been talking about this from the beginning, but it's so true. Again, this is something I got you don't even want to know how many things I got at the house that are like, oh, workout. I bought this whole new thing called FitCube, man. And it is really dope, but it's just sitting there, and even this morning I said, good morning, FitCube. And I was like, I need to get on it. Cause even like you're saying, I have a gym membership. I refuse to give my gym membership up, but just because I will not, right? Plus I did get a good deal on the gym membership. So I don't want to have to pay extra than what I already paying, right? I'm kind of in that retro, grandfathered in, fee. But I will say that I'm a prime example of, look, got the gym membership, got all these equipment things at the house, all the bungee cords, all this stuff, right? But I'm not doing anything with it. And I know Coach Pasqualina was on me. I know it because, she's like, come on, let's get you back right. And I was like, come on, let's do it. And then I didn't, right? So I'm being honest with y'all. Like, this is really something, this is a lesson that I need to take heed to because we got to start somewhere. And you're absolutely right. I mean, see, always these tips are good for us all. And I just appreciate you. When you're talking about this, you work people through that, right? How they start somewhere and think about their end goal. But it really starts with those steps and building them out.
Yeah, and like I said, it's just starting. So today, that conversation you had with the thing, let that be the start, right?
Yeah.
You acknowledged it. Now tomorrow you're gonna do something else. You're gonna take it a step further, and then continue on, build that momentum with that.
I mean, this is why you're the coach. You see what I'm saying? This is why you're the coach. See, I appreciate it always.
Yeah,
Brother,
indeed.
thank you so much. This is
Absolutely.
a great tip for me to incorporate. All of them have been great. And I
Good.
just appreciate you bringing them here on the Day with Trae. Look right there. Let folks know how they can catch up with you.
All right. Well, you can catch up with me at CurtissCalhoun.com on all the social media platforms, IG, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. It's Curtiss R. Calhoun. And then December 6th, we have another Lunch and Learn webinar at 12 p.m. Pacific time. Success starts with self-awareness. So that's a free event that we do online.
Wow. You are stepping it up, man. I love it, man. Bringing the information to the people. Thank you again for being here, for being our resident life coach. I so need it.
Well, thank you for allowing me to get my daily dose of dopeness and my goosies.
There we go. You got it. See, I'm here for it anytime. Oh, my goodness, you guys.